You know about Patriot Mobile and what they stand for. I've talked about their commitment to faith, family, and freedom, but have you made the switch yet? You'll get exceptional nationwide coverage on America's best networks without sacrificing your values. Get unlimited data plans, mobile hotspots, international roaming, and even a backup line on your own phone. Patriot can do it all. Switching is easy. Keep your number, keep your phone, or get a new one. Just go to patriotmobile.com/Kirk25. That's patriotmobile.com/Kirk25 or call 972-PATRIOT. Use promo code Kirk25 for a free month of service. We are going to talk about Ukraine. There is a massive movement that's been happening, Blake, on the Ukraine peace front. So there was, you can set this up, but there's essentially two competing deals that are now being floated. There is a U.S.-led effort that apparently happened with Witkoff and some Russian counterparts in Russia. That's where the negotiations were happening. And then that was leaked. And then the EU rushed to put together their own point-by-point plan. The U.S. one has 28 points, and the EU's is a little bit more
let's just dive into it. We didn't get to this last week. So it was a leaked 28-point plan, as they call it. We're not sure by whom, although evidence is it probably actually was leaked by the Russian side, which was capitalized on the press to say it was a Russian-authored plan. But what's going on is we haven't talked about the war in a while. The war is still going. It is still grinding. There is evidence it has been getting worse for Ukraine than it was a few months ago. They're losing ground a little bit faster. Not super rapidly. It's a big meat grinder war, but things aren't looking promising. And so last week we had this peace plan come out, 28 points, and some of the key ones. Do we have that B-roll of the map that I gave you? I don't have the number in front of me right now.
I think I got it.
Yeah, throw that one up.
122.
122. So this is the heart of it. It would cede to Russia the areas of Ukraine, basically what the current front line is. There's a tiny amount of adjustment in the north, but it essentially matches what the current front line is. It would create a demilitarized zone in Donetsk province, which is one that Russia wants, but they haven't taken all of it. So it would essentially demilitarize the part still held by Ukraine.
That'd be the purple section.
Yeah. And what's very important is this deal, the 28-point deal, would formally acknowledge Russia taking those territories, as opposed to what some have insisted on, where they might allow Russia to keep occupying them, but continue to leave it as, not recognized, that supposedly Ukraine should take it back.
That's U.S. recognition.
Yeah, U.S. recognition.
So that means the President of the United States would come out with the whole of government, Secretary of State saying, and that's something obviously another president could overturn, but of course the Russians could always point to saying that, look, the U.S. recognized this.
And truthfully, I think that is a very important part of what I think a long-term peace would be, because what has kept this a tumor that has flared up over and over again is that it's not resolved. It is never resolved. There is no final jurisdiction
for
of
11
claims.
years now.
For 11 years. And that's likely what led to this war, is the refusal to acknowledge the ceding of Crimea, or I should say the seizure of Crimea. And, their original offer before the war happened was if you would acknowledge Crimea and then a few military concessions, that they would be okay with a long-term peace. That wasn't ceded, so instead we got this war. Other stuff in it, the peace deal would require Ukraine shrinking the size of its military. I think that will be a difficult sticking point.
Now, that's the U.S. version, not the EU version.
The U.S. version, yeah. The U.S. version.
U.S. version caps the Ukraine military at 600,000, which is still huge, by the way, for European terms, especially. The EU plan would give no restrictions placed on Ukraine.
Yeah, it would not allow them into NATO, though would allow them into the European Union, which I feel would be a quite important session, because is Russia going to invade a member of the European Union, especially if the European Union maybe developed some sort of unified armed forces?
Yes.
It seems less likely to me. But the point is, a lot of people have freaked out about this. There's a lot of opposition to it. There has been a counter-European Union plan where the main argument they've made is basically that it has a smaller number of points in it, and it's 19 points instead of 28, which means it concedes less to Russia.
But the neocons are freaking out, and that's the really big thing, because they just don't want the war to end.
They don't.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think they're still playing under an old paradigm. Here's one big key difference between the two plans, by the way. The Trump 28-point plan does offer G8 membership to Russia if they play by the rules over time. So Russia could get back into essentially the League of Nations.
And Trump's talked about that a lot. He mentions it like every time he goes to the G7.
That's a big carrot that is dangling out there for Russia if it plays by these rules. And I think here's the deal. You have, to your point, Blake, this war continues grinding on. There is no end in sight. Massive loss of life and casualties. One thing we know about Russia is they are very good at wars of attrition, where they just grind them out long time. I mean, so I think that if you compare and contrast these two plans, you still have the European Union playing under an old paradigm, if you will. And I think just analyzing both of them this morning and over the weekend, the Trump plan feels much more realistic. I want to play some clips here from the Russia-Ukraine negotiations. This is Rubio and Yermak, and they are issuing statements after the first round of negotiations. Play cut 90.
So it is in my personal view that we've had probably the most productive and meaningful meeting so far in this entire process since we've been involved in from the beginning. We have a very good work product that was already built on a foundation of input from all the relative parties involved here, and we were able to go through some of those items now point by point, and I think we've made good progress.
So he's saying it's the most productive and meaningful meeting so far, and that was Andriy Yermak, who's the head of the Ukrainian delegation to Geneva. So those meetings were happening in Geneva. You know what's an interesting piece of this, by the way, is that a lot of people are speculating this 28-point peace plan was actually drafted in Russian because it looks to be
we mentioned that
translated over. But
I think that's just because when Axios got it, they got it from the Russians, so it's probably in Russian. But my understanding was that, and Rubio came out and said this is the U.S. plan.
Yes, he said it.
Says it right there.
No, he said it was the U.S. version.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What stands out to me about certainly the U.S. plan is they'll complain that it's too pro-Russian, although I would just note, if you're going to oppose a plan that is pro-Russian, I feel you need a plan for, okay, is Ukraine going to win the war?
That's
Are we going to go
said.
until every Ukrainian is dead so you can feel really morally righteous over their pile of corpses? Are you going to step up to pay for it forever? That should be the question to Europe if they want it to go forever.
Or are you going to deploy your own troops?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you have to ask those questions. Otherwise, you're just demanding that every Ukrainian die for your sake.
Because this has been the issue, right? Is that we keep backfilling, when I say we, the West, EU, US, etc., technology, drones, intelligence, etc., but nobody's actually sent troops.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that you can use those drones, you can hit Russia in the backfield, target energy infrastructure, things like this. But you know what you can't do? Capture and hold terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And
only men can do that.
You need men for that. You just
and that would be the biggest escalation of sending actual troops. And at that point,
which nobody wants
to
do.
You're dangerously close to the big escalation that we never wanted. So what it stands out to me in the U.S. plan is it is a serious bid to say we are attempting to normalize relations with Russia after effectively a 20-year new Cold War with them, if you will.
Here's the question that I think, and I don't know if we mentioned it, there is this question about, and Bannon's brought it up, the security guarantee for Ukraine, right? Is that like an Article 5 guarantee,
or
but I wanted other stuff though. It's that Russia gets reintegrated into the global economy, so we stop the endless sanctions. That's also why you, frankly, recognize the territorial change, so that there is a set, mutually agreed upon border between the two, instead of what stands out with the European plan is they don't want to acknowledge this. They want to continue that frozen conflict attitude that we had before this war, where, okay, you occupy this land, but we're not acknowledging it, so it's a potential flashpoint whenever we want it to be.
A couple months ago, people were saying when, I remember I went to Alaska when Trump had to sit down with Putin, and Putin came over, and but then it all kind of unraveled after that, and they announced this Budapest thing, but then it never really got off the ground. And a lot of people were saying, hey, and Ukraine really wasn't agreeing to anything at that point. Zelensky came in and it's like, look, we had the meeting, but you didn't agree to it. So people were saying that an armistice might be the only thing possible at that point. So the fact that Ukraine is on board with this, and we are seeing the Russians be on board with this, I think that actually speaks credibility to, or gives credibility to what Rubio is saying, that actually there's a real possibility for a deal here.
Well, and it strikes me, Blake, to your point, is that the only way to have this be a lasting peace is if you officially recognize the ground that Russia has gained in this long bloody
At
war.
least some portion of it. Maybe there's a counter proposal they can
Sure.
make that cedes some of it back or something. But
but to your point, look, we have to understand that Putin sees this as his legacy. Basically, reverting the errors and the sins of his predecessors in the 90s and when the USSR fell. And so he wants to at least, you have to give him something, is my read on this. And I think this is a realistic,
to the Kremlin
yes,
and say, we did all this and this is what we got.
Well, you got to also understand that Putin is propped up by oligarchs. That's the reason he's able to hold on to powers, because he controls the oligarchs. You have to come back from a war like this and show something tangible.
Right.
Otherwise, this is going to just continue on forever.
And then the person who comes after Putin is going to be like 10 times worse if he's seen as a failure.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, the glass half full, I think EU rose-colored glasses vision is that they're going to be able to sort of install somebody better.
The fanatics who want this war to go forever, I feel like they're just calculating that Putin will die and then somehow Russia implodes after that. And
I just think
that strikes me as highly risky.
Yeah, the last time that we got rid of the Tsar, we got Lenin.
Think of the most insane war hawks you've seen in America. They exist in Russia too.
They sure do.
They're more insane, arguably.